Today we have someone who has finished his PhD studies at the University of Western Sydney. He's also a beach volleyball player, obviously plays on the Manly sand, or used to, not right now. And he's a coach at the AVA, where he trains a lot of junior beach volleyball players. Sam Halley, welcome on the show.
Thanks, mate. It's good to get out of the house.
I agree. We're staying well within the rules, so it's good. It's just the two of us, and there's about a table between us. That's got to be 1.5 meters, right?
2 meters even. 2 meters.
I agree. Sam, I've got to ask now, these days, you're not able to really play with all your friends at the beach, right? Do you do anything to keep up your skills at all at home?
Yeah, so right now, we've been fortunate. Just before all this stuff kind of came into effect, I got into contact with Roger Jones, who's a friend of Crook's as well. And he runs his exercise physiology business. So we got some gear and chucked up onto our roof. So we have like a rooftop space that's the size of our whole apartment floor space, and it's just AstroTurf. And it's just for our apartment. And so we've got a barbell, we've got a trap bar, we've got all the weights as well. And then we've got a sitting volleyball net as well. So we just got like a hammock. We strung a volleyball net up. So my girlfriend, who's also a doctor as well, she plays volleyball. We have Lisa Mergel as well, who's another German. So they're both German. She plays volleyball as well in Manly. So we just sit and play sitting volleyball on top of the roof.
Mad. Just hand setting over it.
Oh man, like you put in all your backyard rules as well.
Yeah.
And it really takes me back to like being a kid. So like when I grew up in Perth and Rossmoyne. And I got into volleyball purely because my brother did as well. So my brother Jack Halley, he's played for the national indoor B team as a libero. Wow. So he's also a midget. And we had
I'm in the club, so don't worry.
Yeah. So we had a volleyball net in our backyard, and it was probably like a 6x5 on both sides, and the net was like a really low net, like 2.30 meters or something. And we just played volleyball in the backyard for like an hour a day. But you'd have like really obscure rules. Like when you have backyard cricket, you'd be like, that side over there is 2 runs, that side over there is 2 runs. If you get it through this gap, over there, if you hit into the garden on the full, it's out. But if you hit it like this, it's not out. So I've put those rule-making schemes back into our sitting volleyball on the roof.
Yeah.
So you're like, you can play this shot in this event, but there's an attack line that you can't go over. But if you move with your hands like this, then it's okay. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least you get to keep to, get your hands on the ball at least. That must be the hardest part now. I saw Bakara do the 2 volleyballs, hand setting, kind of juggling.
That's
hard.
It's really hard to do.
Yeah, it's funny when you see it on an Instagram clip and she just does it. You're like, oh, can't be that difficult. And then if you try it, it's like, especially inside, limited space.
Oh,
it's
inside
super tricky.
Really tricky. Like,
yeah.
We've lost a few volleyballs off the top of the roof. You're just sprinting 4 floors back down, trying to grab before someone else grabs it.
Yeah. Mad. Okay, we gotta start around beach volleyball, I think. Yeah. So did you? Well, you just mentioned it before, but you studied the same school as Jules, the previous guest.
Yeah.
Or you were a student there. Is that where you picked up volleyball? And did you play both indoor and beach in the beginning?
So first question there, you started playing at Rossmoyne Senior High School. So as I said, my brother is 3 years older than me. And as he went through year 8, he got involved from the same teacher as well, I think, that got Jules involved, Robin Fiddock.
Wow.
She's just amazing. She's so inspirational for all the kids there. And I think it's one of the best like little hubs for volleyball in Australia, because at Rossmoyne, it's not a particularly wealthy school. It's pretty basic, but everyone knows about the Australian Volleyball Schools Cup. That used to happen in Melbourne every year. Now it's gone over to the Gold Coast. And like that was built up as such a big thing. So my brother didn't play anything. Oh, he played footy and played cricket. We both played a fair amount of that. But when we got into year 8, everyone's like, hey, do you want to go to Melbourne this year? And as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, you're like, shit, like a week away without my parents, just playing a sport that I've never played. Yeah, sure. So my brother gets into that, and like I'm the little brother that's like, if he does it, I'm doing it. So I learned to play in the backyard with Jack, and then as soon as I got into year 8, I'd already had a couple of years playing, and then you play all the way through high school, and you get really interested in that. But that's only when
That's
I was
only
at
indoor, right?
yeah, when I was at school, that was only indoor. But then Rory Reid, who's a friend of Crooks, he is now, I think, the head of volleyball at Ross Warren Senior High School, and he's implemented a beach program there as well. So now it's like both integrated, which is like unreal, because it took me until I was about 19 before I started playing any beach volleyball.
Yeah. And big question, but how come you prefer the beach relative to the indoor? I mean, because you started with indoor, and that's how most people get started with volleyball. But then a lot of people get so drawn towards the beach side. What was it for you?
I had a good run as a junior, being like the kid that picked up stuff relatively quickly and started playing like, when I was 15, I was playing for the senior team in WA. And I had this really quick rise through volleyball, and I went through into the Australian junior teams, and then had just this mental explosion really, where I realized it was really tricky because I kept putting pressure on myself to do things really, really well, and I got pretty well burnt out because I don't think I had any guidance of really how to play sport at a high level. And
As a teenager?
as a teenager, yeah. And like, although I think I was really technically quite good, and tactically quite good, like when the pressure got to me, because I played libero, so only just passing it. I'm like, fuck, if I can't pass or I'm having a shit game, what use am I? And so that the focus on one skill really got to me. And when I wasn't having a good game, then I was shit. And I felt distraught about that. And so when I was like, you know what, I'm not going to play indoor anymore. I'm going to just do fun things. And I got involved in beach somehow, just as like a refresher from playing indoor. And I was like, if you're not having a good day playing as a passer, you still get to hit, you still get to set, you play defense, you get to serve. So I found like beach volleyball was way more refreshing because you could do every skill, and it didn't matter if you were bad at one thing that day, you could go on and you can play all the other skills as well. And then I realized that the lifestyle of that was awesome as well, because like everything is just autonomous. Like as a team, you're like, the team does this at this time, warm up at this time, we go to this place at this time, and you're like, oh, fuck, got to do the same thing that everyone else has. Whereas like beach, book your own hotel, you maybe go get a coffee before the game, you go chat to these people, and you're like, oh, it's 40 minutes, yeah, I'll go warm up now, I'll go do this thing. And you get to choose your partner as well.
There's a freedom to the beach game, hey?
Oh man, it's the lifestyle for sure. And like coming to Manly as well, like Perth is a nice place, but when you come over to Manly and you see the freedom in Manly, you're like,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to ask as well, how did you decide to go from WA to Manly? Was that just because of beach volleyball, or had you already had a foot in with the AVA, or what happened there?
No, man. The AVA is real recent. So I got offered a PhD scholarship 4 and a bit years ago, when like everything that I had was centered in Western Australia. So like I'd finished my degree there. I did my honours there. I was working at the West Australian Institute of Sport as well as a physiologist.
Wow.
I was playing lots of volleyball there, but I wasn't thinking about it, doing it so seriously. Everything was centered there. And then I was like, you know what, I want to keep going on with my studies. I'll put an application out to see if I can get like a postgrad position in Canberra, or like a master's thing in Queensland or whatever. And Western Sydney Uni came back to me and were like, we can offer you a PhD scholarship. I was like, oh, that's pretty sick. I'll go over there. And I stopped playing volleyball for a year. When I got over, I was like, career. Just go to do career. Just go to
so
do
you didn't
volleyball.
move to Manly straight away? You lived closer to uni, or?
I lived in Parramatta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For 6 months. And that was fucking awful. And like moving away from home as well. Like I was only 21 or something.
Yeah, first time moving away from home?
Yeah, and it got to me. It really got to me, because I had all these expectations, man. These expectations of like, I will be the best academic. I will be the best at doing this and that and that. And some of that shit's out of your control. And when you start to compare yourself to other people, then that gets a bit of depressive cycle. So I was in Parramatta for 6 months. I didn't play any volleyball. Then I moved to Holsworthy. I was in Holsworthy for a year.
Oh, wow.
And then eventually I started coming out to the beach. I moved to Bondi for a year, and then I came out to Manly after that. But Like, I'd always loved the idea of Manly. Like, I played a national tour here once, and it just seemed like fairyland. It was just unreal. I think
God's country, they call it.
oh, dude, there was like a jazz festival on at the time, and it was a beautiful day, and like just walking through the Corso, and you're like, there's a lot of stuff happening here. This is really good.
And did you know that Aaron and a few people have moved over there to play beach volleyball?
Yeah, I've been told the story before. Like, I think, like, I came back from that national tour, and I was talking to one of the volleyball guys, and I was like, man, Manly's an awesome place. I could move there one day. And one of the guys I was talking to it was Mighty Swan.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, yeah, well, Crooks and AJ did that. I was like, yeah, interesting.
Good point.
Then, when I got the chance, I was like, all right, I'm coming here.
Yeah, why not? Okay, so let's talk a bit about your studies and why you decided to go the route that you wanted to with your PhD. And maybe let's begin with, what is kind of the main topic that you studied in a shortish version, and why did you kind of go that angle?
All right. So the topic that I decided to go with in my PhD is a performance enhancing technique called ischemic preconditioning.
Explain that, please.
I'll explain that. So ischemia is a restriction of blood flow within a limb or tissue. And preconditioning says that essentially you have brief cycles of ischemia within your body prior to an event. And the whole idea starts from this observation in the myocardial or the heart event called angina. So where you have like temporary cessations of your normal heartbeat pattern, which means that some parts of your body don't get oxygenated from the blood pumping around it. And they found that people that have angina before a heart attack have a greater chance of survival, or at least the myocardial cells have an increased chance of survival.
So can I ask briefly there? So when you call it preconditioning, does that mean that it's self-inflicted, that it's something that people try and condition themselves for, right? Yeah. Okay.
So with this idea that if you deoxygenate something in little temporary cycles beforehand, you can improve your survival rate. People have thought like, well, in exercise, when you go really, really hard, you can thoroughly deoxygenate your tissue.
Is that what you would call anaerobic exercise style, or not really?
No, if you go absolute balls out, something like a 2K rowing time trial.
Yep, so one of the worst.
I think that's probably the worst event that there is. Your skeletal tissue can drop down very low in oxygenation. It gets down to like 60% or something, which is actually, it goes lower. If you use the near infrared spectroscopy devices, you can like chuck that on your skin. It's measuring the oxygenation of your tissue. If you're putting that on your quad whilst you're doing a rowing time trial, it gets down to like 42% oxygen. Well, yeah, it looks at all the oxygenated hemoglobin species, so deoxyhemoglobin and the other species as well, but so you get really deoxygenated. So, I digress. We've got to go back, right? So if you get really deoxygenated when you perform these events, your efficiency of producing energy within that tissue was really, really limited. So the guys that looked at the stuff in the myocardial research were like, hey, well, this strategy of having these repeated cycles beforehand seems to improve survival rate. What if we could apply that also to exercise? So if you go really hard in like this rowing and you get really deoxygenated during your rowing, if we did these temporary cycles prior to your event as well, maybe that could free up the efficiency of your energy production while you're rowing and allow you to produce ATP, adenosine triphosphate, at a better restricted or unrestricted rate. So you produce less of the metabolites that surround it. So it improves your exercise capacity. So, yeah.
So with that example that you just told us now, would you say that, does that mean that if you were going to do a 2-kilometer time trial on the rowing machine, in the lead up to that, you would go some shorter, like full blast efforts to perform better? Is that what it means?
that's one form of exercise-induced ischemic preconditioning. My research looked at using a blood pressure cuff, so around about that width, and putting it around your thigh. So you want to get the largest skeletal muscle mass that you can get. So we got...
So your quad is good.
Yep, quad. So we got both quads cuffed up, and you have this very, very expensive medical device, which is essentially just an air compressor. Press a button.
Yeah.
And it inflates the cuff up to 220 millimeters mercury. And that's like, imagine the strongest guy that you know just clamping down on your quad.
Squeezing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it obstructs your blood flow, your arterial supply, and also your venous supply or return to your leg for 5 minutes. So you go 5 minutes on your right leg, then you press the button, all the blood rushes back in, and while that one's going back in, on the other leg. So it's alternating for about 30 to 40 minutes. So you do that around about an hour prior to your event, and then you do your event.
Wow.
So it's not so much like, let's just go hard for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's like really purposeful deoxygenation of your leg or like any skeletal mass.
Okay, I have a few questions here.
Yeah.
So let's say we start this and you start on your left quad or whichever, and you compress it for, or you limit the blood flow for what you're saying, 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like a long time.
Yeah.
Are there any worries there? Because, limiting the blood flow for that long is, I'd be worried that my calf was going to go blue.
Your calf does go blue.
Oh, shit.
And it really hurts.
Oh, really? Okay.
It really hurts.
Yeah. So it's not an easier warm-up for a 2K time trial. It's a painful one.
Well,
but in a different way.
Yeah, but it kind of depends on who you are as well. If your pain sensation is at a low threshold, it's uncomfortable. If it's at a high threshold, then it's not so bad.
Okay.
But like irreversible damage or even damage itself occurs around about 10 to 20 minutes.
Okay, so quite a lot more.
Yeah. So it actually takes a fair bit to really screw that stuff up.
Okay.
So temporary stuff it's actually fine.
Yeah. Okay, and I also have been across some instruments that reminds me a little bit about this, but I'm not sure if it's the same.
Katsu training?
Sorry?
Katsu training?
No. Well, explain to me what that is first.
So that's just exercising with a blood pressure cuff whilst it's on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, similar-ish, but I think a bit different. So one thing I have used, but that's been more for recovery, is what's called the Normatec boot. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
So that's, just to explain to the listener, if you haven't heard of it, it's a massive inflatable pair of pants, let's call it that.
Yeah.
And they compress, but probably a lot less than what you're talking about. But then they compress and decompress as you recover. Is that the similar concept?
No. So they have like graduated pressure compartments. So it'll tend to be a little bit tighter around your ankle, going up into your calf, and then it releases a little bit more as it goes into your quad. So that one more so aims to work on your venous return because the pressure only goes up to around about 50 millimeters mercury. And it just squeezes gently, trying to kind of like massage any metabolites back up through your leg to get it circulating within your heart again, to just get it out of your muscles.
Okay.
So that one is more so based on recovery of clearance, whereas my research will... The mechanisms, which is exactly what I research the mechanisms because it's still relatively unknown in terms of exactly what happens to improve sports performance. That's a bit different. That's looking more at mitochondrial efficiency, reactive oxidative species, hemoglobin dynamics, that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. And then the other item that could be similar, but maybe not, again, is what... do you know what a voodoo band is?
Voodoo bands,
yeah. So that's like an elastic, thin but wide band that you strap around. I have used it actually a lot on my quads. So before exercise, I would strap it around pretty tight, and then I'd move through some air squats or lunges with that band on. Is that similar-ish or different again?
I think that's more... Again, that's different. That looks at more so overloading... the stretch receptor or the stretch receptors within those joints. So if you have a consistent pressure around those stretch receptors, then it kind of desensitizes them. So I think you'll find like a lot of the times if you have some sort of pain or discomfort through like your knee, I think a knee is a pretty common one to do. Once you overload those stretch receptors, then after you do your little, I don't know, you maybe do 30 squats, 40 squats in a row whilst you have the voodoo band wrapped around, you find that your range of motion is significantly improved. I think it's because you have desensitization within your receptors. In addition to that, you have pain sensors within your skin as well. And I think if you have any sort of issues with like tight fascia or deoxygenated pockets within your muscle, then that kind of reduces some of the sensation that you have there. So you feel like you can move more freely.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Okay, perfect. That's cleared up a lot of things. So let's go back to your studies then. And what were some of the results that you guys saw in your studies, and what are some of the benefits or uses that you can take away from that?
So one of my initial foray into this research came at the West Australian Institute of Sport, and we were with the Olympic kayaking guys that were based at WACE, which is obviously the acronym there.
So kayaking, would that be downstream, not the rowing
sprint.
part? Oh,
just sprint
okay.
kayaking, flat water kayaking.
Okay.
And we wanted to look at a proof of concept, right? So if you looked at having ischemic preconditioning, which is IPC, if you did IPC prior to a kayaking event, would that be effective in improving your kayaking time?
Yes.
We had other ideas though as well. So if you did IPC prior to your kayaking event, and then about 20 minutes after you did your first event, you had another IPC event, and then you did another race afterwards. So we simulated a competition format, because in kayaking, it's rarely that you have one race in one day.
Yeah, they might do several.
Yeah, so we called it a simulated competition format. We wanted to see if you could use it, so as a precursor to the first one and improve your performance. 2, if you did it again, would the effects be stacked? So could it complement the first IPC and the second IPC to make your second event better? Or would the first IPC effects wash out after the first one, and then you'd have to replicate it and go into the second one? So we looked only at application.
Yep.
There's no mechanism in the first one. So this is when I did my honours project in 2013 or 14. And we found that if you did it, it improved your performance by around about 2%.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Sport is kayaking.
Yep.
Did you do the compression on the quads still?
Quads, yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay.
So it's a systemic effect.
Yeah.
So that's one of the early bits of the research. So the first bit of research in IPC and sports performance came about in 2010. So it's relatively new still.
Yeah.
And at that time, like we had like maybe 15 or less papers that had really looked into it. So we were really building into new information. But it takes a while to publish this stuff. So I think some other people had probably done some research in it as well.
Yeah.
But we were the first ones to look into simulated competition format.
And how many kayakers did you work with? And you said they improved by 2%. Hey, so it's the time.
Yeah.
It's a time improvement.
So it was a 1,000 meter kayak ergometer time trial.
Oh, wow.
Which is it's pretty hard. So they're around about like 3.5 to 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's on that really shitty,
disgusting time frame to go flat out.
Yeah.
And how many kayakers did you have?
You end up, so this is the really interesting thing with sports science, and we could talk for length at this, is that sports science is really hard to recruit people. It's really hard to recruit an elite athletic population, especially when they have a competition schedule, which means that statistics...
So this is the year to do it, Sam. No one's got events running.
Yeah, but I tell you what, if you're looking at doing VO2s and you're doing gas analysis with all these guys, and like one of the things I hated as a physiologist was like you pull the mouthpiece out of the guy at the end and it's just dripping with saliva and there's like strands coming off, and I was always like, man, there's fucking proteins and enzymes and stuff in that saliva.
Not good.
Like, you know, every now and then you get someone's blood on your skin when you're doing like the lactate testing, or you're doing like a little venous sample with butterfly and you're like, oh, bit of blood on my skin, that's fine. Fuck, man, saliva got me. I hated it. Anyway, so like you do it on the legs, it'd get a benefit systemically, so through the whole body. Doesn't matter if it's not localized on the arms or not. Found that if you did it prior to, you get 2% increase. If you did it afterwards as well, you would maintain that 2% increase. If you didn't do it again, you'd lose that, right? So there's one condition that looks at doing it once beforehand, but not afterwards. There's one condition that looks at doing it after the first one only. There's one that does it before and after, and there's one that doesn't do it at all.
So four different scenarios, basically.
Yep, and everyone acts as their own control. So this is what's called a repeated measures study.
Yeah.
So when you do that, your sample size drastically increases because you only have, in this one, we only had a sample size of 10.
Yeah, wow.
And when you have a sample size of 10, you need your variability to be really, really low, and you need your effects of the intervention to be really high to actually have any sort of statistical significance. Otherwise, you have to start delving into using magnitude-based inferences, which is really tricky, and using like effect sizes as well, which are really quite handy when you're doing sports science because your sample size is always too low. If you look at like biology, your sample sizes look like 1,000. So in sports science, sometimes it's an art. Like it is a science, but sometimes it's not. So we only had like 10 guys, which is really tricky.
Yeah, that's a good point within sports science, that your access to elite level athletes is just going to be so small.
Majority of science that occurs for sporting universities happens with like any sort of post-grad guy that's like, yeah, I can do a VO2 today. Do you want to start preloading with bicarb tablets? And there's just a guy sitting next to you at his desk that's just eating like 20 bicarb tablets within 10 minutes. And then he runs to the toilet and comes back. And then like, an hour later, he's having bicarb stuff. You get other guys in the next room like, hey, we need to borrow you for this study. Can you come in?
Yeah.
We need you to just lie down and get a cuff on your leg for a bit. Or we need to take some blood. That's how it is.
Did you get any studies done on you, like from other PhD
definitely.
students?
Yeah.
Any examples?
We looked at doing a topical bicarb cream. So you guys, bicarb is sodium bicarbonate. You take it as a blood buffer. So when you exercise really hard, you produce lactic acid, which is not the villain here. It's actually the protons that occur out of that then disrupt your ability to create energy. And in addition to that, you have a lot of extracellular potassium that comes out, sodium as well. So it's just this ion flux that fucks with your ability to be able to produce energy.
Contract your muscle, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, contractility gets pretty bashed.
Yeah.
So when you have bicarb, then you kind of buffer out some of those protons, and in effect, some of those ions that get extruded into your extracellular space, they don't have as large an effect. So you can either take bicarb tablets or this,
a lot of
which really screws up your gastrointestinal system. The guys that did the early research on bicarb went through a fair few pairs of underpants. But you can also have it through a cream, and we were testing this proof of concept. Can you have it through a cream that goes through your skin? And so like you'd be one of the guys that gets recruited. You have to rub this stuff on your legs. So you'd either have like cocoa butter, which was the control, or you'd have the bicarb stuff.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to do like 1,000 leg extensions on a dynamometer. And that
literally 1,000.
in some studies you'd have to do 1,000. And like your leg would just be fucked, but they'd be like, oh, how was your perceived exertion on that one? What was your pain rating? And like you could have me, and I think I'm a relatively good athlete. Like I've done a VO2 before of 70, which is relatively good.
Yep.
Or you could have another guy that sits in your lab that did a little bit of gym or something, but he's done an exercise science degree, and maybe his VO2 is something like a 38 or a 40.
Yeah.
And his lactate threshold is like 4.
Yeah.
And then he goes and does it, and you look at the variability of that, and it's really fucking shit. It's really bad.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to do. So when you get a sports science study, you really need to look into what is the population that they used.
Yeah, I think that's with almost any kind of study, right? You need to look at the sample size and what type of people they are. Like there's so many variables behind the scenes often with scientific studies, I feel like. I mean, I'm no expert, but...
So, like, my girlfriend, Peggy, she is a Parkinson's researcher at the Garvan Institute. So she's a neuroscientist. So if you have that girlfriend, it makes you feel really dumb, even if you haven't done a PhD.
Good point.
But there's some statistics chats that we have where if I get a p-value that's less than 0.05, which is said to be statistically significant, that's pretty good in sports science. It doesn't happen that often that you actually get a p-value because it requires large effect against very low variability. But if you're working at an institute and you're using really large sample sizes, you can get a p-value from close to anything. It just means that it's statistically significant. So if you are trialing a drug to reduce some sort of disease, and every time without fail in a population of 100, there's 1 or 2 people that don't have that disease because of the drug, that'll be a statistically significant result. Is that a worthwhile result? Probably not.
Yeah.
And is the severity of their symptoms just less? Probably. So that's where you need to have an effect size, which looks at if there is an event that's occurring, what is the magnitude of that event? And that's where sports science really uses magnitude-based inferences and effect sizes much better.
Do you mean they're kind of forced to do that because the sample size is so small?
Yeah. You have to. You have to. Otherwise, it'd be really hard to actually infer any sort of real changes that occur in sports science.
So with these studies that you've done, have you taken anything on board yourself for when you play your sport? Are there any benefits from that? Is anything going to give you a higher vertical sound? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, look, when you're looking into this kind of stuff, so like my first study that I did at WACE and UWA, that was a proof of concept. It was an application study. When I got to UWS and I had a really awesome supervisory team, so I had Jason Siegler, Rick Lovell, and Paul Marshall. When I got there, I did a lot of my work in just in a lab setting. So you don't have a kayak, you don't have anything that represents real sport. You have a dynamometer, which is essentially just like a leg extension machine, and you just kick. And it really accurately records the torque that you produce and the rate of force development that you have, or rate of torque development. You have the EMG, so electromyography, that have the little sensors on your skin, which detect the electrical activity within your muscles. We have the NIRS as well, which is a little oxygen sensing device that you just put on your skin.
So it measures basically the power in your legs through a leg extension. Yeah, in a few different ways.
And we looked at the way that your brain delivers electrical messages to your leg to actually make that extension. So you electrocute people as they do it to see what their brain's inputting versus what their muscle is capable of. All this stuff, right?
Yeah.
How representative of a real sport is that?
I don't know. That's probably...
So it's,
for two sports, I would say probably not that much. But I mean, just for that leg movement, maybe a little bit.
It's really fundamental exercise physiology. It really is. In terms of what it actually taught me about how to use it in sport, it's pretty limited. In terms of how your body works and what it does to produce energy, that's quite interesting. So did I learn anything about myself in that? No. But being in a sports science environment, you get involved in so many different studies with so many different people, and it's really interesting. And that's where it's really beneficial.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's jump across a little bit now then to how you got involved with the AVA and what do you do for them?
So last year, I decided in all of my wisdom that I was like, no, I'm going to take 2 months to just go and play volleyball in Europe. So this is when I'm meant to be writing my thesis. And I was like, I'm going to go on a holiday right now because I feel like at 25, I don't have that many opportunities to go over. And if you're not part of the national team or something, then you don't have many opportunities where you're responsibility free to just go over and play tournaments. So,
did you mean play beach volleyball tournaments?
Yeah. So I signed up for a bunch of 1-star events. So that's the lowest level of the FIVB World Tour, all throughout Europe.
Yep. Same partner or different partner?
It was going to be the same partner. He dropped out, and that's when I was like, shit, I need to get another contact to be able to play with some other guys here. And the person I went to was Margot Viltons. No, Margot had just begun with the Australian Volleyball Academy before it was even called that. At the time, it was still the Australian beach volleyball team, I guess, with the junior guys. And she was running this Europe tour for all the guys to give them an experience of going over throughout Europe and playing all the events. Cool. And I had nothing to do with her. but someone put me onto her. And they're like, hey, you got to have a chat with this girl. She can help you out being able to get into contact with some other guys to play there, like finding partners, finding events, people to train with. So initially, I just latched onto that. So went over, had a couple of days with my girlfriend in her hometown in Germany, and then went and started playing some tournaments with a mate, Kai Martin, down in Bavaria. So went through Bavaria, went back out of that, and then the Aussie guys were training in the Netherlands at the time, in Zwolle, and I went there and I just had like one training session with one of the Aussie junior guys, played a national tour in Belgium, and then she was like, hey, we're playing a 3-on-3 tournament in France. Do you want to come with that? I was
3-on-3.
Sick. All right. So like, went over to France, and this is all purely like as a player at the time.
Yeah.
And went over to France, and they had this Airbnb, and it was Margot, Brad Tutton, and then all these like kind of high level juniors, like really high level juniors from Australia. And it was probably like a group in total of 8. And they're like, do you want to join? I was like, sick. So I played a bunch of these 3-on-3 tournaments, and I was like, so I'm thankful that you brought me on here. I'm not really sure how or why I'm part of this. She's like, people just say that you're a really competitive guy, you know something about volleyball, and it's good to have you as like a player around the younger guys so they can learn off you. And I was like, oh, cool. So like throughout that Europe tour, I just did that. And I helped in a couple of training sessions because I thought that what Margot and Brad were doing was just fucking awesome. The experience that they were giving the athletes and the coaching style that they had was based around like the lifestyle of beach volleyball and how you maintain yourself as an athlete. I thought that was unreal. And like obviously I have something to give with a sports science background. So I just contribute here and there. And then when we got back to Australia, I was like, you know what, I'd really like to continue coaching. Like I've done stuff coaching for MBVA. I've coached a bunch of the Ross Moyne schools. I've done some state coaching before, but I was like, I need to get involved with this. This is really cool. Like I just finished my PhD or just about to finish my PhD. I really want to get involved. So I just like everything that was happening with the AVA as it was really evolving, I was like, I want to be a part of. And so I started getting around the group through that, purely just volunteering to go like, if it's a week in Brisbane, I'll go to Brisbane for a week. I'll do my PhD while I'm there at night, and I'll coach during the day. If it's a week in Adelaide, I'll do that. So I did that from like June last year through till March this year. All that was just volunteer stuff. And then as soon as I got to March this year, finally got signed on, and now we're not allowed to work.
So unlucky.
Yeah.
So the AVA, where are they based? A certain place, and how do junior players get involved with the AVA?
So the AVA's got essentially 3 streams that they look at. So one is AVA beach volleyball, which is really competition focused. It has athletes dispersed all throughout Australia, but they all have the same common point of Margot as their head coach.
And where is she based?
She's based in Canberra. So there's volleyball training facilities, beach volleyball training facilities in Canberra, but there's like little groups here and there. So I am still the AVA beach volleyball coach for Sydney, along with Roger Jones. In Queensland, there's a Queensland Academy of Sport that's headed up by Frog, Craig Marshall. Adelaide, they have base there as well. Melbourne, WA, like Jason Fox is another guy back in WA. He does the WA stuff. So all the beach volleyball guys kind of dispersed around the country.
Yeah.
Indoor volleyball, guys and girls, is based in Canberra, and they are more so training based. So rather than like AVA guys are looking at playing competitions in Australia and then doing the world tour, the indoor stuff is looking at a training hub where you can go on tours with the junior national programs, but basically your hub is just about training.
Yeah.
How you get involved in that as a junior player is going through your state programs and just training as well as you can, performing well at national tournaments. Your AVA coaches that are based in each state, they'll know who is performing well and who's developing talent.
So they're going to pick them, basically.
Yeah, but it's
a bit more organic than that, maybe?
It's really quite organic.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you might have a club coach that has a chat to one of the AVA guys, one of the coaches at some point, and is like, hey, this guy is developing really, really well. You got to check him out next time that there's this event on or something else. And you'll be able to see them. You'll be able to track their progress.
Yeah. That makes
So
sense.
you don't want to just go in and grab someone and pull them out and be like, you're now in this training environment, because they've got no life skills really. They've got no training knowledge of how to be an elite athlete or anything developing. So there's also AVA part-time, which is really important. So it's for those guys that are transitioning from their home states and they want to go into high-level volleyball. They can enter AVA part-time first, which is like they have camps. AVA has camps based around Australia. They have 4 a year. Those guys can come in, do that week there. They also get to have a budget of 4 weeks of training in Canberra. So they can come and visit Canberra cost-free.
Oh, mad.
And do 4 weeks in a row, or 1 week here, 1 week there, and they get to be involved in the training environment and then get to go back to their home state, train with their club, their state team, be around their parents and be like, hey, this is how we're progressing. It's actually really cool. This is for me, or it's not. So it's got a kind of a gradual intake, which is really good.
That's awesome. Are there any talent that you've noticed that's coming up that we should keep an eye on in the future? Or are there any new, like Maria Faye's, someone that's going to make the Olympics?
Definitely, but I think it's really hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. Like I've seen so many guys that have been like unreal athletes or really good head screwed onto them, and they can play volleyball really well, and then they kind of drift away or they get injured or something like that. So
that's why sport is so interesting, right?
Yeah.
We just don't know.
And it's like Australia, it's just you don't have that athlete base that some of the other countries would have, where if you have 100,000 kids participating, one of them's going to come out.
Yeah.
But in volleyball in Australia, you don't have that base. So, like, you can't rely on population just producing one person. So
yeah, that's always interesting. I think because I think a big issue in Australia is that a lot of the young talent, they get pulled to other sports. But, you know, I'm from a country where there's 5 million people, way less than in Australia. And currently we have the best male team in the world, right? So we don't have a big pool either. But volleyball is a bigger sport relative to the other sports in Norway. So I agree with that. But yeah, you never know. And someone like Maria Faye, you know, she's already played in the Olympics and she's still quite young.
I think it's really key to have a super strong club and even like a family base to help you develop the skills as you grow up. I think an error that's occurred in Australian volleyball in the past has just been, we're going to go to a national camp and we're going to invite all these kids that are above 190 centimeters, 195.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a big camp and be like, you guys are the tallest and you can play volleyball a bit. That's okay. We'll take you. Whereas Maria Faye is a great example of like a really strong volleyball family and a good club environment. She just came down to the beach and just played against everyone.
All the time.
All the time. And she got really good at volleyball and just loved volleyball. And then she became successful out of just loving volleyball enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
It's rare that you have the talent that you can be like, you're 15 or 16 and you're 190 and you can jump. You don't know how to play yet, but we can teach you.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We talked about that with Jules as well.
Yeah.
But I've got to ask you, with your volleyball skills, if you're listening to this podcast, you might not be able to notice, but Sam, you miss a few fingers on your left hand. And volleyball is a hand control game, especially for hand setting.
Yeah.
When did you lose your fingers, and were you playing before and after, and what's the whole story there?
I love telling people that it was only like a year ago. But nah, it happened when I was 2. I put my hand in a paper shredder when I was young. Not the smartest thing to do.
At 2 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just unlucky. Not that bad for me. Like, I've always known it to be like that. I can remember it happening, but I can't really remember anything before it. So I don't know what it's like to have 2 full hands.
Yeah.
But like any of the skills I've learnt, I've always had this with me. So I don't know anything different.
And you're right-handed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been way worse for my parents. I feel pretty bad for Shaz and Scott in that one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you learned to play beach volleyball without 4 of your left fingers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's hand setting like?
I think I'm relatively good at hand setting. You'd have to ask some other guys. Like, I think Bakara is a really good hand setter. I think Crooksy's a really good hand setter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I'm relatively good. I will try to handset everything that I possibly can all the time. When I play with Mateusz, who's my partner at the moment, is Polish dude, we just run fast offenses. So like a shoot ball to the stick, shoot ball behind, everything that you can do that's fast, it's really good.
Yeah.
And so that requires your hand setting, and you just get used to it, I think.
And for beach, do you mainly play like a defense, or do you play at the net? I'm guessing at the back, but I don't know. I haven't seen you play. So.
Definitely a defender.
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm super athletic in terms of jumping really high or really, really fast. I think I just can understand a situation relatively well, and I'm coordinated. So I think technically I'm relatively good, but I don't have that dynamic, explosive action like some of the other guys.
Yeah. How tall are you?
176.
Yeah. So you're a relatively short beach volleyball player, right?
I think for the last few years, I've been the shortest guy playing on the national tour.
Yeah. Wow. So, and when that happened, when you're the shortest guy playing on the national tour, that forces you to play a certain way, doesn't it? Or what do you think?
It's just problem solving. It has to be problem solving. Like I know that I can jump out of the sand 60 centimeters maybe, which is not huge. I know that my passing is good. It's not great. So what do I do to get around the really big guys that are just taking away all your space? So the way that we play looks to just solve problems. So if I get set up and down, it gives the blocker a lot of time to get over in front of me and take out my options. So I want to take away time from the blocker. So I need to run a really fast play in front. Or if I pass the ball on for my partner to come up and hit, then I can run really fast behind. So I can kind of hold the blocker there and then go behind on an open net. So
it's forced you to play a faster game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's like each to his own. Like if you're a really big guy and you can play a fast game like that, that's awesome. Maybe you don't need to, but it's you got to answer the questions that are asked. And that's how I've chosen to answer them. I could be really good at shooting. Like you look at a Nick Lucena, he's not the biggest guy. He jumps relatively well, but like he runs that up and down ball with Phil Dalhouser, and he's unbelievably good at cutting the ball and then shooting the low line. So I could get really good at that.
Yeah.
But the way I've chosen to play has always been with hitting. So if I want to be able to hit, then I need to get an open net. So I need to make these fast plays.
Yeah, that's interesting because I would guess then that the teams you guys are playing often will serve you.
Yeah.
So you're forced to side out a lot of the time.
Yep.
And you still want to hit. So if I understand this right, you still prefer to be able to hit a hard ball and not just place it all the time like a cut or something like that. So that's why you play a faster game. Is that right?
That's pretty much it. Like playing indoor when I was young and playing 10,000 hours of backyard volleyball where the imposed rule is that you have to hit, you're not allowed to shoot.
Yeah.
Because it's 1-on-1. Like I've just hit all my life, and then you get into the sand and you're like, fuck, why didn't I not train any sort of shooting at all?
Yeah.
So then you're like, okay, I'll choose just to be able to hit. So now I have to make these solutions rather than try to train how to make a shot. Because I think it stung us before as well, playing that the more time that the ball has in the air, the more time the opposition has to get a dig or a touch onto it.
Yeah.
So you've got to find the fastest way to get the ball to the sand.
So do you prefer a longer rally or a shorter rally then? Because it sounds like your style is a little bit, you're trying to make it shorter, but I would guess that maybe you're a bit fitter and have more endurance during a long game than some of the taller players. Where do you sit on that level?
I think I'm relatively well developed in fitness, but I think it's silly to try to think that you can just outlast someone throughout a rally. So I think you've got to get the ball down to the sand as fast as you can at any time. When a game goes long and the tournament goes long, then I'm pretty happy with that. The only issue there is that your jump can go down throughout a tournament, but you can't get shorter.
Yeah.
So it's troubles.
One thing that I wonder what your take on this is. One thing that I realized after I stopped playing tournaments Because then looking back at it, when we would play an all-day tournament in Manly, most players would barely take in any energy or food or drinks at all during a whole day of playing. They drink a lot of water because you're out in the sun and you get dehydrated and you're thirsty. But most people will really just drink water and eat a little bit. And a tournament can go for 8 hours. You might have your first game at, let's say, 8 a.m. And if you make it through to the final, sometimes that would be at 4 p.m. I'd say down at the beach. What's your take on that? And did you do anything to kind of make sure that you had energy and recuperated after each event besides, doing the whole compression on your quads?
Yeah, I think just eating a lot of carbohydrates and really digestible carbohydrates. So
give me some examples.
I tried one recently that tasted awful.
You're selling this.
Yeah, there was
really
there was some research that came out recently that looked at using mashed potato as an alternative to energy gels, and it worked with cyclists. So pro cycling team was saying, can we use this amount of mashed potato to the same effect as energy gels as a carbohydrate supplement during exercise?
Normal potatoes or sweet potatoes?
Normal potatoes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, because the GI is obviously higher.
Higher, yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm going to try that. So we had mashed potatoes with a little bit of banana and cinnamon throughout a tournament. And
all mixed into one?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't sound great.
Tasted
Taste-wise.
awful. It was hard to get through. But you have a lot of very simple carbohydrates throughout that. So energy-wise, it was really great. So you have sometimes you might have some milk rice, which is just German kind of rice pudding.
Yep.
So you eat a kilogram of that or a kilogram of mashed potatoes or anything else that's like that. I think as soon as you try to get involved into fats or protein throughout a tournament, it becomes harder to digest, especially when you play a Manly style tournament where you have to play maybe 4 to 5 games in a row, which is really hard.
And it's hot outside and you're in the sun.
Yeah.
So high GIs. I mean, one trick that I've heard is baby food. Because you can get mashed up pureed sweet potatoes or banana and stuff like that, and that might taste a little bit better than...
I think it would. Cost more.
Yeah, probably.
But
do you reckon it helps your performance though?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think you look into this stuff and you just got to be a sports scientist about it. What's actually going to be the best way to fuel your body for this, and you put aside all sort of bias or stigma.
Taste and
taste is one of them, but if you're eating baby food, that's actually a really good energy supplement. So I would be fine doing that. I think.
So the tournaments we talk about in Manly are, well, for the most part, really amateur tournaments. Not many athletes there are getting paid. But have you seen any stuff on the World Tour where the professional players, when they play, what kind of food intake they would try and get during a tournament day or anything like that? Someone like Bakara, for instance, when they're playing.
Pretty often, I think Bakara will go for a juice. She's big on juices when she doesn't have a lot of time.
Vegetable or fruit juices?
You just see her rock up to training sometimes with a boost juice.
Oh, okay,
I think. So boost juice, anything like that. If you have carbohydrate gel packs, so you can get them from Coles, they're called Winners. You just have those things throughout the day. I think it's a really interesting one. You can't eat too much simple carbohydrate on a competition day. If you're worried about body composition on a tournament day, then you're in the wrong place. You need to be planning as if you're going to play 8 games, even if you're only playing 4, because you don't want to leave it to chance that you even get close to running out of carbohydrate and then having to draw on fat and protein. It's just dumb. So
especially for a sport like beach volleyball, for sure.
And you got to back up. Yeah,
very explosive.
You might find that between games, if there's a long break, people go on to chocolate milk because it has the sugar in there as well as the fat and the protein that comes from the dairy. So I think that's not a bad idea as a recovery between games.
I think I've done something similar with chocolate milk. I think I would say one thing though: don't try that for the first time on an important tournament. You gotta try that before maybe for a training session or something, because some people might have a bit of a funny stomach if they take too much chocolate milk in one go.
Yeah, and like, the mashed potato one that was during a Manly tournament where Matt and I focus generally on the national tours.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, does it matter if this one doesn't go well for us? Not really. We also trial like having warm-ups in the gym. So we'll go to Anytime Fitness and we'll be doing something like 80-90% squat reps before a game. Same with like power cleans, and you might have some.
So in the morning before you have games, you would go into the gym and do that.
In the most recent national tour, and it's like Matt's interested in sports science. I'm a sports scientist. I know the evidence that goes in with that and the potential pre-activation that you can have, and also the testosterone boost that comes from that as well.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome.
This is like the fundamental of a sports scientist. Like, if you're not willing to try your experiments just like on yourself, then you can't have the empathy to go in when you're actually testing an athlete. Like, it's really hard when you're doing these tests, and we did one of these power tests during my PhD where you looked at, if you did the preconditioning, how could it improve your critical power output? So your like how well you can just produce energy on end with no deviation to go down or up. So if you go up at all, then you start accruing protons and you start to limit the amount of exercise you can produce. If you go down, then you start to kind of save up a little bit more anaerobic energy. You can go back up. So that's the idea. Critical power test means that you start really high and then you go low and then you flatline. So have you ever done a Wingate test?
No.
Wingate test is 30 seconds all out as hard as you can on a bike.
Okay. Yep.
Right. So at the start, you're going at like 1,000 watts. 5 seconds in, you're going at 600 watts. And after that, for the last 30 seconds, you're going at something like 300, 200 watts. So this critical power test is a 3-minute version of that. So you start up at absolutely as hard as you can, 1,000 watts. And after 30 seconds, you're going at 200. And after a minute, you're going at 200. It's horrible.
Do you mean that? Would you tell the person performing that test that, okay, that's 30 seconds, go down to that? It's just, so if I was to do it, I just start as hard as I can and then just try and hold on.
Exactly.
But obviously you're going to drop off.
And you see the pain in the guy's face that you're testing.
Sounds horrible.
Can you imagine not having done that yourself and not experiencing what you've done?
Yeah.
So like, as a sports scientist, when I look at all this stuff, I'm like, I can't advise someone else to do that stuff if I've never done it before myself. So when I do all those tests and I design those tests, I do it on myself first. When you're electrocuting people to look at their voluntary activation to see how well they can activate their muscles, you need to go through all those ramp procedures with yourself, like using an electron probe like on your femoral triangle and fucking shocking yourself, like shooting yourself across the room on a wheelie chair because your legs extending. Like all that, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
So like when I say we're doing this gym stuff, and if I'm a coach, I can recommend doing some of this stuff. I need to be able to do it myself first. So if you're trialing potato as
try it first.
a fucking cheap way to do it in a tournament, you need to know what it's like yourself.
Man, back to that potato. I think I would just make the potato mash and then eat a normal banana, like at slightly separate times.
Yeah.
might be a better version.
Yeah, I'll go back into that again.
Hey, I got ask a super common question. I don't know if you have a take on it. How can volleyball players improve the vertical, and how much genetics are in there? Like,
a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
So fast twitch muscles, right? It's very genetic, meaning limited how much you can improve it, but you still can, I assume? Or?
You definitely can. So if you're someone that has a lot of type 2B muscle fibers, so the fast twitch muscle fibers, you're generally born with a percentage. Yeah. And you can be born with that, and you can do that relatively well without having done any training.
I'd say Aaron has a lot of
man.
B.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a very big jump.
But if you're not in that ilk, you kind of look at yourself on a force velocity curve, really. So if you move something really slow, so if you move something really, really, really heavy, but you move it really slow, there's not much power produced. If you move it really, really fast, but it's not very heavy, it's not much power produced. So you got to find something in the middle. And generally people will sit somewhere along that curve as to where their force or velocity properties lie for them. And strength training can definitely increase your position on that curve to get you more powerful. But then it's like, are you someone that's already really strong and do you need to move a little bit faster to increase your power? Or are you someone that's really, really fast but isn't all that strong just yet? And you can get marginal gains. You can get really marginal gains. Can you change the proportion of muscle fibers that you have by doing that training? Yes. Is it going to be big? No. But what's one thing that isn't taken into account is repeatability. So those guys that can jump really high, how many times in a row can they do that? If you're someone that doesn't jump that high, you can use strength training to increase it a little bit, but in addition to that, you can do that a lot of times in a row. So you'll often see some athletes going into institutions, AIS, or they go into some sort of professional club training environment, and physically their top end speed might not change too much. Their ability to jump high might not change too much, but their ability to reproduce that over and over and over is drastically improved.
Yeah. It's mad when you watch long beach volleyball rallies and, obviously the first and second hit generally is going to be a harder hit, but then as it goes on, most players are just getting the ball over, right? Like whatever.
Yeah, I think
keeps the ball in play.
You look at, and I've talked about this one a lot with some friends before, is Bruno Oscar Schmidt. So he won the 2016 Olympics. He's 185. He's not the biggest guy, but super duper powerful. And he played this final last year in Warsaw, in Poland. And it was Bruno and Evandro playing against Sorum and Mol in the final of that event. And Bruno hit an unbelievable amount of balls into the net.
And he's a powerful player.
And he's really powerful. And everyone's like, fuck, man, he's just playing shit. Like, he can't jump in this game, can't do this. Like, man, what happened to Bruno? Because in 2016, he was unreal. But, like, what happened in the games before that? Everyone, I think a lot of the times, like, you expect that the great games happen in finals.
Yeah, but that's when they're on their most
Fatigue. Like, that was a really hot tournament. It was like 33, 35 degrees. They had to go through a lot of games. I don't even know if they got straight into round two, or maybe they had to play an additional game. Like and if you're a short guy, your jump gets smaller throughout that tournament. If you're a big guy, you don't get shorter.
Yeah.
So, like, when the great games happen in the finals, everyone's fucking beat up. They're tired.
Yeah, mental fatigue, physical fatigue.
They still have to perform. So, like, maybe when the mental focus is the sharpest because everyone has seen a lot of this team, they know what their tendencies are. You know how to play the game, so you see a lot of digs, but maybe the actual play style is a bit limited because everyone's jumping 5% less or everyone's a little bit slower. And so when you see the shorter guys getting into finals, they've had to side out nearly every single ball, the whole tournament. Like, it's really hard.
Yeah,
and when they get into the final, you're like, oh, fuck, this guy's hitting into the net. You're like, man, he's done a lot of jumping this tournament. It's amazing he can still get up.
Be important to recognize that. Hey, jump back a little bit. I wanted to ask so when you talked about training for explosiveness and I guess volleyball related, it's a vertical. What are some of the exercises that you would recommend?
One of the things you want to be is specific with your training. So specific refers not like, let's put a weight vest on and let's go play volleyball, because that's specific to playing volleyball. Or people talk about, they're like, oh yeah, let's get like elastic connected to your hand and let's do like a heap of spikes as well, because you're spiking against resistance.
Okay, I'm just going to clarify, both of those two things sound like bad ideas.
Yeah. But like Karch and St. John and those guys back in the day used to play with weight vests on, like after their Team USA practice indoor, and then they used to go out to the beach and play with a weight vest on.
Man.
Look, I think
that's many years ago. We've learned a few things since then.
Yeah, hopefully. But I think you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater as well. Like, some of that stuff is kind of interesting, and I'd like to look into it again. But I think with specificity in your training, it replicates joint angles. It replicates speeds as well. So if you're looking at increasing a vertical jump and you need to increase your force because you know that you're low on the force velocity curve, you're just faster, maybe you're looking at a trap bar deadlift where you're explosively taking it up as fast as you can.
So light weight on the bar, but you're jumping fast up, or maybe even no weight.
It could be a jump. It could be just on the ground. If you're chasing strength more than you are velocity, then it could be heavier, and you're looking at the eccentric portion of that. But the basis is there that in a trap bar deadlift, you're in a relatively similar joint angle as to taking off in a jump. And the speed of that is going to be relative as to whether you want to chase speed or force. But ideally, most things are still moving relatively fast. Yeah. I think, though, the issue is that comes up a lot in strength conditioning programs is we chase too often bilaterally. So using a squat, using a deadlift, using a clean. We chase too often with bilateral because there's not that many movements that are going to be completely balanced and bilateral in any sport. And too often we go too heavy. You need to look at this force velocity curve and be like, can we use the timing of your movement better? Can you reduce the tempo so you have a greater load through time under tension rather than purely just a mechanical stimulus of having to push a lot? So yeah, too heavy and then too bilateral. So if you can get away from those things but still be specific in improving the force that you are required to produce along the force velocity curve and replicating joint angles, then I think you can be relatively successful. And a lot of the times, if you're an untrained individual or if you're trained already, just going to something that is unilateral or going to something that is predominantly time-based rather than load-based can already produce quite a large effect.
Can you give some examples of unilateral movements you could replicate, or not replicate, but that you could do in the gym that would, to an extent, replicate what would happen on the sand?
So already if you have partner resisted push steps, so you have a band that goes around someone and they're moving laterally like the crab step,
but it's fast. Get the band around their hip.
Yep. So you have someone that's kind of resisting them and following them as they're making push steps out laterally. That can be quite effective. Single leg squats are pretty good. If you're looking at Cossack squats, again.
Yeah, they're all great.
If you're doing a single leg clean.
A single leg clean? I haven't done that.
Yeah. So
with a barbell?
Yeah. So there's a researcher, strength scientist, or I feel like it's Scandinavian, but I'm not sure. Franz Bosch, who looked a lot at making strength exercises much more specific to the sport. And he looked a lot into one, unbalanced training, but two, really sport specific. So you have sprinters that start kind of in the bottom of an RDL position with a bar that then make a clean movement. But as they clean up, say they're based on their right leg and their left leg's already back, as they clean up, they go into a hip hinge sprinter position onto the top of a box.
Whoa.
With their left leg. So it's replicating, again, the joint angle of sprinting.
Yeah.
And the velocity of actually stepping up and trying to get the speed into that movement.
Wow.
So
I assume you would start with very lightweight here and do this supervised.
Definitely.
Sounds like an advanced exercise.
Yeah, but I think in all of this as well, the more you think about it, just general open play of any sport and uncontrolled builds a really robust and resilient athlete. And the more that we go into the gym and do really structured strength and conditioning stuff that goes away from the movements that happen in sport and in a game, the more that we build muscle mass that isn't necessarily used to be effective in sporting movements.
Yeah, the way I look at it a little bit is that I think before a lot of people undergoes, this type of strength and conditioning program or strength program in the gym, I think they need to have a little bit of a base just with your more traditional weightlifting. And mainly I would say just to build up the joint, it's not necessarily strength, but have, some integrity in the joints because they're going to build, they're going to get stronger slower than your large muscle groups.
Yep.
And then when you have that base, like you say, if you want to be more sport specific, there's always a certain amount of chaos around sports. And two of the sports I follow is, beach volleyball, surfing. There's so much chaos and unpredictability in the movements that you do in those two sports that something like that could be, like you mentioned, could be beneficial down the track.
I think the athletes that you look at, so why do we do strength and conditioning? Number one is to improve player availability is number one.
So with that, do you mean something like injury prevention?
Yep.
Yep.
But injury prevention is like it's a hard thing to say that you're doing this and it's going to prevent injuries.
Okay.
So it's like improving the robustness of your athlete. And two is to then make them physically better, because the game teaches the game, but the game also builds strength in the player that is unbelievably specific to that game. So the more work that you can do in an open and controlled environment, the better. So obviously if you're injured, you don't get to do that. So you need to make sure that your player is available to be able to play that sport. So that's number one. Number two, if you get better at the sport because your physical capacities are increased, then that's really good as well. So I think you find that when you're dealing with like some of the awesome players, the ones that have played the longest, that don't get injured, that are the strongest, a lot of the time they are multi-sport athletes. They might have played a lot of AFL when they're young, or football, and then they go into like basketball for a bit, and all the time they've been playing volleyball. And you just look at them and you're like, they have cat-like reflexes. They can land off a block and then make a dive straight away. It's because like what movement in the gym and allows you to land off a block onto one leg, rotate 82 degrees, make a diving action into a roll, get back up, and then jump again.
Yeah.
Like, recreate that in the gym. But I'm sure some situation like that has occurred somewhere in a combination of the other sports that they've played. And their body is building a resilience to it because it's had a stimulus and then it has an adaptation. So I think the better multi-sport athletes, or the better players, are going to be multi-sport athletes.
Yeah. Keep the variety when you're young is so important, right? That's what Jules said as well. Like, you got to do more than one thing.
Like, we had some exit interviews with some kids from a junior development camp recently, and they're like, what can I do better? And you look at some kids and you're like, maybe an S&C program. And you look at others and you're like, go play AFL 9s. Go play tag footy, because you need to develop speed and change of direction.
Yeah.
Like, that stuff's going to get you better right now than trying to do anything in the gym. You have so much more capacity that you can build.
And an amazing side effect as well by doing team sports, right? At the young age, they learn so many social settings, so rules, if you want to call it that. Like, they learn to interact with other kids, right? And that's huge. If you're just by yourself in the gym, you don't really learn any of that.
I think the one thing that I'm big on is like the emotional intelligence that you can have of like reading a room, reading the players that you have around you. So like, how do you fit into the social group that you're in? What actions do you need to perform? What does the social group need? So like, if you play sport in a bunch of different teams and you're continually changing the people that you're around, you get a much wider audience that you get to sample from, and you have your own machine learning where you can learn to fit in and to have your own personality to develop to fit that situation. And I think the guys that you see get like pigeonholed really early, it's a probability distribution, right? Some of them are going to be awesome. But I think more often than not, those guys are going to be less socially advanced than the guys that play lots of different sports and have lots of different interactions.
Yeah. Yeah, you see that right now. It's a bunch of NFL players. They've got no idea what to do. Hey, Sam, for you, what does the future look like for you? Do you still want to pursue some of the science, or are you still on an athletic journey with your sport? I mean, you're still so young. You have a ton of opportunities. What have you planned for the next few years?
If there is a flaw that I have, well, there's heaps of them, but one of them is planning and seeing in the future.
Yeah.
I would like to try to keep as many doors open as possible. So right now I'm working with Sydney Uni as well as a research assistant in the talent development program that's running through the sports high schools. So I'm a researcher there and also providing service as a sports scientist. I want to stay involved in research as much as possible because I think it's quite interesting and it's quite engaging to be able to produce new information. At the same time as well, like I'd love to be able to pursue volleyball coaching. with the AVA or with any other group. I just think coaching is like a culmination of you're getting your physiology and your biomechanics and your psychology and skill acquisition, and you're putting them all together in one job, and that's a coach. And some people are deficient in other areas, and some people are really good at all of them. But I think that's really interesting. And then probably like playing right now. Like I know that I'm not going to be a professional player. I've known that I'd never be a professional player, but the constant problem solving and ways to improve myself despite my physical limitations is really interesting for me.
It's a good challenge, right?
It's really interesting. And I feel like I gain a lot of experience myself by finding solutions to this and being in those situations. So then when I go back to coaching athletes or just dealing with people anyway, then I have a better empathy for what they're going through. So I think it's really important to, and that's my form of going through my chosen adversities, which I live in Manly. I'm comfortable. I don't have very much adversity. I've got the best, like in this current situation, I've got a rooftop terrace where I get to play volleyball and have a gym and shit. Like it's fine.
Yeah.
I live a great life. But, you know, on the sporting field where you have those stresses, that's my chosen place that I can choose to put myself through that and have my own little challenges to then come out and help other people. Do I want to continue and try to play more World Tour events? Yes. Is that going to be super important for me compared to developing better in other areas? Nah.
And there's a cost to it as well, right? A financial cost to try and pursue some of the World Tour events.
Yeah, there is. But at the same time as well, I think it's more so the opportunity cost. If I choose to play this event, does that mean that I can't be a part of this coaching group? Does that mean that I can't be a lecturer, which is an actual situation? I chose not to be a lecturer for one of the units at Western Sydney Uni this year because I wanted to be able to go into the World Tour and play events.
Yeah.
Does it really matter right now? Like, I'm 26. Will I ever get to be able to play this season again? No. Like, if I only have 3, 4, 5 years of volleyball left in me, well, I'm going to have maybe another 60 years of my life to look back at that and be like, oh man, I wish I spent $1,000 here or there to play that event.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. The money doesn't matter. It's the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'd prefer to say that every opportunity that came up, I took it, and I took that as far as I could rather than be like, I wish.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. Hey, Sam, where can people follow you, or do you do any private coaching with beach volleyball or anything like that? Where's the best place to go to?
It's a tricky one. So you can contact me for private stuff through beachvolleyballschool.com in the Manly base. You can request a private session with me. You can go to the MBVA and request that. I also coach squads as well. Where can you follow me? I have an extremely low profile on all social media.
It's usually a good sign these days, I would say.
So I would email me.
Yeah, guys, I think the best place if you want to get involved with beach volleyball in the Manly area is beachvolleyball.com.au or mbva.org.au. That's the two really organizations that run beach volleyball down there, right? Cool.
That's the one, yeah.
Thanks so much for the chat, Sam. Thanks for coming on.
It's been interesting. It's been something good to do during this time.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next one.